The great chamber was silent. 10,000 alien delegates sat in their floating seats, watching the small group of humans standing at the center of the room. Ambassador Alina Vasquez kept her back straight and her face calm, but her heart was beating fast. This was the moment humanity had waited for. This was the day they would finally join the Galactic Conclave. The chamber itself was beyond anything Alina had ever seen. Crystal walls rose so high they disappeared into clouds of soft light. The air smelled like flowers from 100 different worlds. Beings of every shape and size filled the seats around her. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some were made of living light. 4,000 species had come together to build the greatest civilization in the universe. And today, humanity would become the 4,001st, at least. That was what Alina believed. The High Arbiters sat on a platform above everyone else. There were 12 of them, ancient beings who had guided the conclave for thousands of years. The eldest among them was called Vorath. His body looked like flowing silver water that had learned to think. When he spoke, his voice filled the entire chamber without effort. "We have studied your species for 100 of your years," Vorath said. "We have watched you discover faster than light travel. We have observed your colonies spread across 40 worlds. We have analyzed your history, your biology, your psychology, and your potential." Lena allowed herself a small smile. The conclave was thorough. That was good. It meant they made decisions based on facts, not fear. "Our algorithms have processed more data about humanity than any species in conclave history," Vorath continued. "We have run simulations beyond counting. We have consulted the wisdom of our oldest members, and we have reached a unanimous decision." The chamber grew even more silent. Alina could hear her own breathing. Humanity's denied membership in the Galactic Conclave. The words hit Alina like a physical blow. She heard gasps from her team behind her. She opened her mouth to speak, but Vorath raised one flowing appendage. "There will be no debate. The decision is final." His silver form rippled with something that might have been regret. "Your species is developmentally incompatible with our civilization. You are too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous." "Dangerous?" Alina found her voice. "We come in peace. We have harmed no one, not yet," another arbiter said. This one looked like a tree made of purple crystal. "But our predictions are clear. If humanity joins the conclave, you will destabilize the peace we have maintained for 10,000 years. Your nature makes it inevitable." Lena felt anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. Anger would only prove their point. "May I see these predictions? May I understand the data?" "The data is not for lesser species to question," the Crystal Arbiter replied. "Lesser species." The words burned in Elena's mind. Vorath spoke again. "Humanity will be quarantined within a 50 light-year zone around your home star. An energy barrier called the Veil will be erected around your space. Any human vessel that crosses this barrier will be destroyed. Trade with conclave species is forbidden. Communication is forbidden. You will develop alone, contained, until such time as your nature changes or your species ends." "You are imprisoning us," Alina said quietly. "We are protecting the galaxy," Vorath replied. "This session is concluded. You will be escorted back to your vessel. You have 30 days to withdraw all human presence beyond the boundary before the veil activates." Guards approached Alina and her team. They were tall beings with 4 arms and skin like polished stone. Alina looked around the chamber at the thousands of delegates. Most refused to meet her eyes, but some did. And in those eyes, she saw something strange. They were afraid. Not afraid of what humanity might do to them. Afraid of something else entirely. Afraid of what was being done to humanity. As if they disagreed but lacked the courage to speak. Alina memorized those faces as the guards led her away. The journey back to human space took 3 weeks. Alina spent most of that time alone in her quarters, staring at the stars through her window. 40 years of her life she had dedicated to this moment. She had learned 17 alien languages. She had studied conclave law until she could recite it from memory. She had believed, truly believed. that humanity was ready, and they had been thrown away like garbage on the 15th day. Her communication console beeped with an incoming message. The sender was anonymous. The encryption was unlike anything human technology could produce. Alina opened it. The message contained only text, no voice or image, but the words changed everything. Ambassador Vasquez, you deserve to know the truth. The Conclave did not exile humanity because you are weak or primitive. They exiled you because our algorithms showed them something that terrified the High Arbiters to their core. They showed what humanity could become. In 10,000 years, no species has ever matched the rate of your development. No species has ever shown your capacity for change, adaptation, and growth. The simulations did not predict that you would destroy us. They predicted that you would surpass us. Every single one of us. You would become something the galaxy has never seen. And the Arbiters decided it was better to cage you now than to face what you will be later. This is not justice. This is fear. Remember that. The message deleted itself before Alina could save it. But she did not need a copy. The words were burned into her memory. When the human fleet crossed back through what would soon become the Veil, Lena called a meeting of all the ship captains. She stood before them with new fire in her eyes. They think they have defeated us, she said. They think we will fade away in our little cage, forgotten by the galaxy. They are wrong. We will not fade. We will not break. We will build something greater than anything they have ever imagined. And one day when we are ready, we will show them exactly what humanity can become. The captains looked at each other. They saw the same fire spreading from person to person. They had gone to the stars seeking friendship and found only rejection. Now, they would go forward seeking something else. They would seek their own destiny. Behind them, the veil began to activate. A wall of energy stretched across space, cutting humanity off from the rest of the galaxy. It was meant to be a prison, a tomb. But as Alina watched the barrier seal shut, she made herself a promise. This wall would not hold them forever. Nothing would. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake, and humanity would make sure they never forgot it. 20 years had passed since the veil closed around human space, and things were falling apart. Director Yuki Tanaka stood at the window of her office on Mars, watching dust storms roll across the red plains below. Reports covered her desk. Every single one brought bad news. The mining colony on Kepler 442b was running out of equipment they could not replace. The agricultural world of New Eden had suffered crop failures because their imported alien seeds had finally stopped growing. The outer settlements were losing people to despair, their populations shrinking as hope died. Without conclave technology, humanity was struggling to survive. Yuki was 63 years old. She had been a young scientist when the exile happened, full of dreams about working alongside alien researchers to unlock the mysteries of the universe. Those dreams had died with the Conclave's verdict. Now she led the United Human Research Initiative, and her job was to find ways to keep humanity alive. It was not going well. Her assistant, a young man named David, entered the office. His face was pale. "Director, we have a problem. The Colonial Council is meeting tomorrow. Senator Morrison is proposing that we send a delegation to the Veil to beg for mercy. He has enough votes to pass it." Yuki closed her eyes. She had known this moment would come. 20 years of hardship had broken something in many people. They were ready to crawl back to the Conclave and accept whatever scraps the aliens offered. What would begging accomplish? She asked quietly. Morrison says the Conclave might give us limited trade rights. Enough to survive? Survive as what? As pets? As prisoners who behave well enough to earn treats? Yuki shook her head. That is not survival. That is slow death with extra steps. She turned from the window and walked to her desk. Under a pile of reports was a folder. She had been building for years. Plans, ideas, possibilities. Things that seemed impossible but might not be. David, I need you to arrange a meeting. Not with the council. With the scientists. All of them. Every researcher, engineer, and inventor across human space. Tell them Director Tanaka has a proposal. Tell them to come ready to change the world. The meeting happened 2 weeks later on a space station orbiting Earth. 3,000 of humanity's brightest minds gathered in a chamber that had once been used for international summits. Now, it would be used for something bigger. While UKI stood at the center of the room, surrounded by physicists, biologists, engineers, and dreamers from 40 different worlds, the conclave has technology we cannot match, she began. They have knowledge gathered over 10,000 years. They have resources from millions of planets. We have none of that. By every logical measure, we should fail. She paused, looking around the room. But logic is not everything. The conclave species stopped growing a long time ago. They reached a certain level and stayed there, comfortable in their power. They forgot what it means to struggle. They forgot what it means to fight for survival with everything you have. She pressed a button, and holographic displays appeared around the room showing hundreds of research projects. We have not forgotten. In the past 20 years, working alone, cut off from the galaxy, human scientists have made discoveries that would have taken conclave researchers centuries. We did it because we had no choice. We did it because failure meant death. And now I am asking you to do more. The room was completely silent. Every eye was on Yuki. I am launching Project Prometheus, named for the god who brought fire to humanity against the will of the other gods. Our goal is simple. We will develop technology that surpasses the conclave, not matches surpasses. We will build ships faster than theirs. We will create energy sources more powerful than theirs. We will make ourselves into something they never imagined we could be. A physicist from the Luna Academy raised her hand. Director, with respect, that sounds impossible. Everything is impossible until someone does it, Yuki replied. 40 years ago, faster-than-light travel was impossible. 20 years ago, surviving without the conclave seemed impossible. I am not asking you to believe it can be done. I am asking you to help me prove it can be done. She gestured to the displays. Alone, each of us can accomplish little. Together, sharing knowledge across all human worlds, holding nothing back, competing not against each other, but against the limits of reality itself, we can accomplish anything. The room erupted in discussion. Arguments, questions, doubts, but also excitement. Also hope. Yuki watched ideas bounce from person to person, watched old rivals find common ground, watched something new being born by the end of the day. Project Prometheus had begun. The next 40 years changed everything. Human scientists developed the quantum fold drive, an engine that bent space in ways the conclave had never imagined. Travel that once took months now took hours. Every human colony became a neighbor to every other colony. Human engineers created sustainable terraforming technology that could transform dead rocks into living worlds in decades instead of centuries. The 50-light-year prison became a garden of 200 thriving planets. Human programmers built artificial intelligence that worked alongside people as partners, not replacements. These is help solve problems that would have taken human minds alone thousands of years. But the greatest achievement was not technological. It was social. The Exile Accords established a new kind of government. Every human being had a voice. Every colony had representation. Decisions were made not by the powerful, but by the many. Former enemies became allies. Old hatreds died as people realized they needed each other. Humanity stopped calling itself humanity. They adopted a new name, Solari. Children of Sol, children of the sun that had watched over their first steps into existence. 60 years after the exile, the Solari Ascendancy completed its greatest project, the Nexus Gate Network. Massive portals that allowed instant travel between any 2 points in human space. When the first gate activated, the energy release was enormous. Across the galaxy, sensors detected the surge. Conclave observers who had long ignored the quarantined humans suddenly turned their attention back to the veil. What they saw made them afraid. The algorithms had predicted humanity would develop. They had not predicted this. The quarantine was supposed to slow them down, weaken them, break their spirit. Instead, It had made them stronger than ever. In her office on Mars, now a green and living world. The elderly Yuki Tanaka received reports of the Conclave's reaction. She smiled. They thought the cage would kill us, she said to David, now an old man himself. They never understood. Pressure does not destroy humans. Pressure makes diamonds. She looked out her window at a world transformed by human determination. And we are just getting started. Captain Marcus Chen had served on starships for 30 years, but he had never crossed the veil. No human had. The barrier that imprisoned his people had held strong for a full century, until now. The exploration vessel Infinite Horizon hung in space near the edge of human territory. Marcus stood on the bridge, surrounded by his crew of 40. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, and dreamers who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. The new drive is ready, Captain, his chief engineer reported. According to our calculations, we can fold space around the veil entirely. We will not pass through it. We will go around it. Marcus nodded slowly. The Conclave had built their barrier to stop any ship that tried to cross. They had never imagined a ship that did not need to cross at all. Take us out, he ordered. The Infinite Horizon's engines hummed with power that the Conclave had never dreamed possible. Space twisted around the ship like water bending around a stone. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed to dance. Then they were through. Marcus stared at the view screen. He was looking at stars no human had ever seen from this angle. He was standing in Conclave space, a place forbidden to his kind for 100 years. We did it, his navigator whispered. Captain, we actually did it. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. But the mission was just beginning. For the next 3 months, the Infinite Horizon explored the edges of Conclave territory. What they found was nothing like the paradise the aliens had described during first contact. The core worlds were beautiful. Glittering cities and perfect gardens where the powerful species lived in comfort. But the outer regions told a different story. On a dusty moon called Vreth 4, Marcus discovered the first of many horrors. The Vethkai were an insectoid species, their bodies covered in iridescent shells that changed color with their emotions. Once, they had been artists and musicians, creating works of beauty that had moved the galaxy. Now they lived in camps, working in mines, their spirits broken. Marcus landed on Vreth 4 without permission. He walked into the largest camp with only 2 guards. Ignoring the warnings, his crew shouted through his communicator. An elder Vethkai approached him. The alien's shell was dull gray, all color drained by years of despair. Its voice was a clicking whisper. You are not from the Conclave. Your shape is strange. What species are you? I am human, Marcus said. My people were exiled by the Conclave 100 years ago. The elder's shell flickered with a hint of blue, the color of surprise. Exiled? We were told your species was destroyed? We were not. We survived. We grew. Marcus looked around at the camp, at the tired workers and the armed guards watching from towers. What happened to your people? The elder's shell darkened. 300 years ago, we created a new form of music. Compositions that could touch the mind directly, that could make any being feel joy, or sorrow, or hope. The High Arbiters declared our art dangerous. They said it could destabilize the peace. They burned our instruments. They imprisoned our composers. They forced us to forget everything that made us who we were. Marcus felt cold anger building in his chest.
For making music?
For making music that moved people too deeply. The Conclave fears anything it cannot control. The elder studied Marcus with eyes that had seen too much suffering. Why are you here, human? What do you want from us? Marcus thought about that question. He had come to explore, to gather information, to understand the galaxy beyond the veil, but standing here, looking at a people whose only crime was creating beauty, he realized he wanted something more. I want to share something with you, he said. That night, Marcus brought portable speakers from his ship. He gathered the Vethkai workers in the center of their camp, hundreds of gray-shelled beings who had forgotten what hope felt like, and he played them music, human music. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, jazz from old New Orleans, African drums and Japanese flutes, and 1,000 other sounds from 1,000 human cultures. Music that had survived wars and disasters and the death of old Earth itself. The Vethkai listened. At first they were confused. Then they began to sway. Their shells started changing color. Blues and greens and brilliant gold spreading through the crowd like fire. The elder was weeping, his tears leaving tracks on his weathered face. We thought beauty had died in the universe. We thought we were the last ones who remembered what it meant to feel. You are not alone, Marcus said. My people were exiled because the Conclave feared what we might become. Your people were enslaved because the Conclave feared what you could create. But fear cannot last forever. Nothing built on fear can last forever. Word of the human ship spread quickly. From world to world, the story traveled through whisper networks the Conclave could not monitor. The Solari were real. They had survived. And they were offering something the Conclave had never offered. They were offering respect. Marcus met with dozens of subjugated species over the following months. The Kryn, silicon-based beings whose mineral-rich bodies made their worlds valuable and their people disposable. The URI telepaths who had been forced to serve as living surveillance tools, their minds violated daily by Conclave masters. The Methari, ancient warriors who had once challenged the Conclave and been beaten into hiding for 1,000 years. Each species had a different story, but the pattern was the same. The Conclave's peace was not peace. It was control. Any species that threatened that control was crushed, enslaved, or erased from history. When the Infinite Horizon finally returned to Solari space, Marcus carried more than data. He carried a list of allies waiting to be freed. The Solari Council listened to his report in stunned silence. Recordings of suffering, testimonies of oppression, evidence that the civilization which had called humanity dangerous was itself built on cruelty. Chancellor Vasquez, kept alive by human life extension technology, was now 170 years old. Her hair had turned white, but her eyes still burned with the same fire they held on the day she was expelled from the Conclave chamber. They told us we were too aggressive, she said softly. They told us we would destabilize their peace. Now we know what that peace truly costs. She turned to the council. For 100 years, we have focused on building ourselves up. We have become strong. We have become advanced. But strength means nothing if we use it only for ourselves. She looked at Marcus. Captain Chen has shown us a galaxy in chains. The question before us is simple. Do we stay safe behind our walls and let the suffering continue? Or do we become what we were always meant to be? The council voted that day. Humanity would no longer hide. The galaxy had exiled them because they feared what humans could become. Now the galaxy would finally see it. Marcus Chen returned to the stars 3 months later, commanding not one ship, but a fleet. Their mission was not conquest. Their mission was liberation, and in camps and mines and prisons across 1,000 worlds. Beings who had forgotten hope began to remember what it felt like. The Solari were coming. Admiral. Priya Sharma had never wanted to be a soldier. As a young woman, she had dreamed of being a teacher, helping children understand the wonders of the universe. But the universe had other plans. When the First Contact Initiative needed someone to lead it, the Solari Council chose her, not because she was fierce, but because she was kind. Kindness, they said, would be humanity's greatest weapon. Now Priya stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, watching a small alien shuttle approach. Inside that shuttle were representatives of the Kryn, the silicon-based species whose worlds had been stripped of resources for millennia. They were coming to hear humanity's offer. They were coming to decide if hope was real. The Kryn. Delegation entered the meeting room like creatures expecting a trap. Their bodies were made of living crystal, beautiful and strange. But their movements were hesitant. Centuries of abuse had taught them that powerful species always wanted something. Priya greeted them with a bow. A gesture of respect she had learned meant something to their culture. She saw surprise ripple through their crystalline forms. Thank you for coming, she said. I know this took courage. The lead delegate, a being named Crystallos, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. We have heard stories about the Solari. Stories that seem too good to be true. The Conclave tells us you are monsters who want to destroy everything. But the Whispers say something different. What do the Whispers say? They say you offer partnership. They say you treat lesser species as equals. Crystallos paused. Such things have never existed in the galaxy. We do not know how to believe them. Priya nodded slowly. She understood. When you have been hurt for long enough, trust becomes almost impossible. I cannot make you believe with words, she said. Words are easy. The Conclave has used beautiful words to justify ugly actions for 10,000 years. So I will not ask you to trust our words. I will ask you to watch our actions. She pressed a button, and holographic displays filled the room. Images of Vethkai children attending schools built by human volunteers, videos of URI telepaths working alongside human scientists as equals, their mental gifts respected instead of exploited, documentation of trade agreements where both sides benefited fairly. We have made this offer to 47 species so far, Priya continued. Full partnership in what we call the Coalition of Free Worlds. Technology sharing with no conditions. Cultural exchange that celebrates differences instead of erasing them. Mutual defense against any who would harm us. And most importantly, equal representation. Every species has one vote, including the Solari. We do not rule the coalition. We are simply one part of it. Crystallos studied the displays for a long time. Finally, the Kryn delegate asked the question that mattered most. What do you want from us? Priya smiled. We want you to be yourselves. The Kryn have knowledge of minerals and materials that no other species possesses. We would love to learn from you. But you do not have to share anything. You do not have to do anything except exist as free beings. That is enough. Free beings, Crystallos repeated, as if tasting a strange new flavor. We have not been free beings for 2,000 years. Then it is time for that to change. The Kryn joined the coalition 3 days later. They were not the last. Over the next decade, the coalition grew faster than anyone had imagined possible. Species that had been enemies for centuries found common cause against shared oppression. The Eori brought their telepathic gifts, creating communication networks that allowed instant translation between any language. The Mithari emerged from their 1,000-year hiding to share warrior traditions that transformed the coalition's defense forces. The Vethkai began creating art again, their music spreading joy throughout the free worlds. Each species brought something unique. Each species received respect they had never known. The Conclave watched with growing fear at first, tried economic pressure. Any world that traded with the Coalition lost access to Conclave markets. But the Coalition built its own markets, its own supply chains, its own economy. The sanctions hurt, but they did not break. Then the Conclave tried infiltration. Spies slipped into Coalition space. Saboteurs targeted power plants and food supplies. Admiral Sharma's intelligence teams caught most of them. The ones they caught were not executed or tortured. They were shown the truth about Coalition life. Then given a choice, return to the Conclave or stay as free citizens. Most chose to stay. Finally, the High Arbiters made their most desperate move. Priya was attending a cultural festival on the Vethkai homeworld when her security chief burst into the celebration. Admiral, we have intercepted a plot. Assassins targeting Coalition leadership. The evidence points directly to the High Arbiters themselves. Priya felt cold fury in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. How many assassins? 12? All from species loyal to the Conclave. They were planning to kill you, Chancellor Vasquez, and the leaders of 7 Coalition species. A coordinated strike to throw us into chaos? The old Priya, the one who had dreamed of being a teacher, would have wanted revenge. But she had learned something in her years of service. Revenge was the easy path. It was also the path that led to becoming exactly what you fought against. Arrest the assassins, she ordered. But do not hurt them. And gather every piece of evidence. Every message, every order, every credit transferred. I want a complete record. What are you planning, Admiral? Priya looked out at the festival below at Vethkai and humans and Kryn and a dozen other species dancing together, celebrating life instead of fearing death. The Conclave rules through secrets and lies. They tell their citizens that the Coalition is dangerous, that the Solari are monsters. We are going to show them the truth. 1 week later, the Coalition broadcast the evidence across every communication channel in the galaxy, not just to Coalition worlds, but to Conclave worlds as well. Every planet, every ship, every station received the same transmission. Images of the assassination orders, signed by the High Arbiters themselves. Recordings of Conclave officials discussing how to murder civilians. Financial records showing bribes to assassins. And at the end, a simple message from Admiral Sharma. The Conclave has told you that we are the threat. Now you have seen their true face. We do not ask you to believe us. We only ask you to open your eyes. The Coalition welcomes all who seek freedom. Our door is open. It will always be open. The effect was immediate. On Conclave worlds, citizens who had trusted their leaders for generations began asking questions. Why would a peaceful government need to assassinate people? What else had they been lied to about? Protests erupted on 100 planets. Demands for answers became demands for change. Within the Conclave itself, species that had been loyal for millennia began to reconsider. If the High Arbiters would murder to maintain control, who was safe? What happened to species that became inconvenient? Rebellions ignited. Not violent ones, not at first. But workers refused to work. Ships refused to fly. The perfect machine of Conclave control began to break down. One gear at a time, in the Great Chamber on Nexer Prime, the High Arbiters convened an emergency session. The eldest among them, Voroth, looked at his fellow rulers with something ancient in his silver form. Fear. We were wrong, he said, the words bitter on whatever served as his tongue. The algorithms did not predict they would destroy us through war. They predicted something worse. They predicted they would make us obsolete. That beings would no longer need us. That our entire purpose would become meaningless. The other arbiters were silent. They had ruled for 10,000 years. They had controlled a galaxy. And now that control was slipping through their fingers like water. We must act, said the Crystal Arbiter, who had once called humanity a lesser species. We must stop them before it is too late. Vorath shook his flowing head. It may already be too late, but we must try. Summon the fleet. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we possess. We will end this at its source. We will destroy Earth itself. The order went out across the Conclave. The greatest military force in galactic history began to assemble. 10 million warships. 4,000 species. One target. But as the fleet gathered, something strange happened. Not every ship responded to the call. Not every soldier obeyed. On thousands of vessels, crews looked at their orders and looked at each other and asked a simple question. Were they defending peace? Or were they defending chains? The answer would decide the fate of the galaxy. The Conclave Armada stretched across space like a wound in the stars. 10 million warships gathered from every corner of the galaxy, moving with terrible purpose toward the Sol system. It was the largest military force ever assembled in the history of the universe. On the bridge of the Conclave flagship Eternal Order, High Arbiter Voroth watched the distant sun grow brighter. That small yellow star had given birth to the species that now threatened everything he had built. In a few hours it would watch that species die. All ships report ready, his tactical officer announced. The human fleet is assembling near their third planet. They have approximately 50,000 vessels. Voroth allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 50,000 against 10 million. The humans were brave, but bravery could not overcome mathematics. Send the final warning, he commanded. Offer them one chance to surrender. The message went out across all frequencies. Voroth's ancient voice filled the void between stars. People of Earth, you have defied the Conclave. You have spread chaos through the galaxy. You have given false hope to species who should have remained content with their place. This is your final opportunity. Surrender now, dismantle your coalition, and return to your quarantine zone. If you refuse, you will be destroyed. Every ship, every station, every world, choose wisely. The response came almost immediately, but it was not what Vorith expected. It was not a military challenge. It was not a defiant refusal. It was an invitation. Chancellor Elena Vasquez appeared on every screen in the Armada. She was 170 years old, kept alive by human technology. But her eyes still burned with the same fire they held the day she was cast out of the conclave chamber. "People of the Armada," she said, her voice calm and clear, "not the arbiters, not the commanders. I am speaking to you, the soldiers, the engineers, the cooks and cleaners and ordinary people who were ordered to come here and kill us across 10 million ships. Beings of 4,000 species stopped what they were doing and listened. 150 years ago, I stood before the conclave and asked for friendship. I was told my species was too dangerous to join the galaxy. We were locked away, forgotten, left to die alone in the dark." She paused. "But we did not die. We grew, we learned. We became something the arbiters never imagined. Not because we were better than anyone else, but because we refused to accept that survival required cruelty." She gestured to something off-screen, and the image changed. Now viewers across the Armada saw the Coalition fleet. Human ships flew alongside, Kryn vessels and Vethkai cruisers and Eerie transports and 100 other species. Different shapes, different sizes, different colors, all moving together in perfect harmony. This is what we built. Not an empire, not a hierarchy, family. Every species equal. Every voice heard. Every being valued. This is what the arbiters fear, not our weapons. They fear the idea that power does not have to mean domination. They fear the proof that another way is possible. Vasquez's image returned to the screen. Her ancient face was full of something that looked like compassion. "We did not come here seeking war. We came seeking family. Every being in your fleet, from the highest commander to the lowest recruit, has a place with us, not as subjects, as equals. The Coalition will welcome you. All you must do is choose." She leaned forward slightly as if speaking to each viewer personally. "You have been told we are monsters. You have been told we want to destroy everything. But ask yourselves, if that were true, why would we open our door instead of raising our shields? Why would we offer friendship instead of firing weapons?" She smiled, and somehow that smile held all the warmth of 100 human generations. The arbiters cannot answer that question, because the answer would destroy everything they have taught you to believe. The transmission ended. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Armada hung in space, 10 million ships waiting for orders. Then, slowly, something began to change. A Kryn battlecruiser broke formation. Its captain broadcast a simple message: "We choose freedom." The ship moved toward the Coalition fleet. Then another ship followed, and another. And another, on the Eternal Order. Vorith watched in horror as his perfect armada began to fall apart. Not from weapons fire. Not from sabotage. From choice, order them to return. He screamed at his tactical officer. Threaten them. Do something. But threats only accelerated the collapse. Species that had been loyal for millennia remembered old grievances. Soldiers who had followed orders without question began questioning. Commanders who had believed the Conclave's propaganda saw the Coalition, fleet welcoming defectors, and wondered if they had been wrong about everything by the time the last ship made its choice. The Armada had split almost in half. Nearly 4 million vessels had joined the Coalition. The rest remained loyal to Vorith, but their confidence was shattered. They had seen their own people choose the enemy. Vorith made his decision. All loyal ships, attack. Destroy them all. The battle that followed would be remembered for 10,000 years. Coalition ships moved with perfect coordination, their diverse crews working together as if they had trained for decades. Human tactical genius combined with Mathari warrior traditions and Yuri. Telepathic communication to create something the Conclave had never faced. But more importantly, the Coalition fought differently than any enemy the Conclave had ever known. They did not aim to kill. They aimed to disable. Engines were targeted instead of life support. Weapons were destroyed instead of bridges. Again and again, Coalition ships demanded surrender, and again, they accepted it. Crews that had been enemies moments before were taken aboard Coalition vessels, treated with respect, offered food and medical care. The battle lasted 9 hours. When it ended, the Conclave's military power was broken. Vorith's flagship drifted alone in space. Surrounded by the wreckage of his dreams, Chancellor Vasquez's shuttle approached the Eternal Order. She had insisted on coming personally, despite the protests of her security team. Some things, she said, needed to be done face-to-face. She walked through the damaged corridors of the ancient ship until she reached the command center. Vorith waited there, his silver form dim and defeated. "You were right to fear us," Vasquez said quietly. "Not because of what we would destroy, but because of what we would build. Your exile made us who we are. Your cruelty taught us kindness. Your prison became our crucible." Vorith looked at her with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "What happens now? Will you destroy the Conclave as we tried to destroy you?" "No." Vasquez shook her head. "We will offer you what you refuse to offer us. A place in something greater. The Conclave will dissolve, yes, but its people will not be harmed. Every species, including yours, will have a home in the Coalition. The only thing that will die is the idea that some beings are worth more than others. You would forgive us? After everything." Vasquez was quiet for a moment. "Forgiveness is not about what you deserve. It is about what we choose to be. We choose to be better than our worst experiences. We choose to build instead of burn." She extended her hand, a human gesture of peace. "Will you join us?" Vorith looked at that hand for a long time. Then, slowly, a tendril of silver reached out and touched it. The galaxy watched as the Galactic Coalition was officially born. Every species, from the mightiest to the smallest, took its place in a new order, built not on power, but on partnership. 10,000 years later, historians still studied this moment. Students across 1,000,000 worlds learned how a single exiled species had changed everything. Not through conquest, but through conviction. Not through weapons, but through welcome in the great archives of the Coalition. The original document of humanity's exile remained preserved, a reminder of darker times. Beside it hung a plaque with words that had become the Coalition's founding creed, spoken first by Chancellor Elena Vasquez on the day the Conclave fell. "They told us we did not belong among the stars. So we built a place where everyone does. And across the galaxy, in languages of sound and light and thought and song, those words were repeated by beings who had once been slaves and soldiers and enemies. Now they were family. Now they were free. Now they were home."